The controller then watched as the plane flew south for 2 miles, made a hard left, and flew north, towards Love Field. The pilot had lied. Those in the tower had received a special bulletin telling them to report suspicious activity to a special security number. And we kept calling that number all afternoon, getting nothing but a busy signal, the controller told us, until we heard that they had caught the lone gunman, as they called it. Then we stopped calling and let the matter drop. 4 years later, an assistant district attorney from Jim Garrison's office came calling to show pictures of possible pilots involved in the incident that day. One of them, a weird-looking character with a funny-looking wig, was on the evening news just a week later. They said his name was David Ferry and that he had committed suicide, the controller told us. That's when I smelled a rat. Barry Seal's CIA recruiter, David Ferry, was under suspicion for participation in the plot to kill Kennedy, less than 24 hours after the assassination. Had Garrison known then what we know today, he might never have turned his suspect over to the FBI to be released with an apology. Just how much can CIA agents get away with? Would you believe child molestation? In 1961, David Ferry was arrested on numerous charges of pedophilia. Meet the New Orleans cops who busted Ferry for molesting young boys.
Well, from the statements we got, we arrested, I think, if I can remember correct, was harboring runaways, contributed to the delinquency of juveniles, and I think there was a crime against nature.
Well, we were investigating a Civil Air Patrol outfit whose parents were complaining to us that their boys were, from time to time, on runaway status, were missing, and had been missing for some time. We discovered that he was having sexual relations with the boys, contributing to their delinquency, doing things like if he moved into a new apartment, all the boys would sit around in a circle and masturbate, celebrating the new event. We arrested him. We executed a search warrant as properly as the law calls for.
Normally, anyone arrested for molesting children wants to slip into a hole somewhere and pull it in after him. Instead, David Ferry had warrants issued for the police officers who arrested him.
We discovered that arrest warrants were put out for us. Arrest warrants for myself and other men who had been on the raid at his home. And that was a big shock to me, to find that he had secured arrest warrants for our arrests. It was a frightening moment for me because I couldn't imagine having done anything wrong, and to have a search warrant out for me, an arrest warrant out for me was somewhat terrifying, but it went on for a number of days, the fright and the fear and the intimidation that I felt.
Couldn't believe it. It's never happened before, anything like that, you know. I figured he had to know somebody, and that's the only thing I could figure. He had a little power.
That here was a man with incredible power. He had some power somewhere to do this to us. And we were, as I said, was 40 years ago, we were young, naive young men. We didn't quite understand what was happening to us. But the thought occurred to me that he had a CIA connection. It did occur to me, and I had really no idea where it was coming from, but I knew it was some incredible force behind him, helping him.
What happened next was even more bizarre.
As the time went on, I started getting phone calls from Cubans who claimed that they were head of the Cuban Revolutionary Front here in New Orleans. And on one occasion I was told that they could deliver runaway boys for me. This was from the Cubans. If we would promise not to prosecute Captain Ferry.
In America, when you work for the CIA, being connected means never having to say you're sorry, as we will now see in the budding career of the young Barry Seal. This man, Joe Nettles, was a kind of second father to the young Barry.
I met Barry Seal when I was out there taking flying lessons with Ed Dufford. And Barry was out there all the time. And Barry, he was a senior in high school. I said, Barry, what you going to do when you get out of high school? So I'm going to work for you. I said, you ain't working for me. You're going to college. told me, he said, Joe, I'm fixing to make $200,000. So what you going to do, rob a bank? He said, no, I'm going to fly some arms to Cuba. I said, you going to fly to the penitentiary, where you going to fly to?
Barry's arrest with a plane load of weapons, we learned, had taken place in the tiny town of Longview, Texas. Joe wishes, more than he can say, that Barry hadn't been so lucky with the judge.
Oh, but he showed me a letter from the judge. I believe it was a very complimentary letter. It exonerated him from any guilt whatsoever. He got out of that. If he hadn't gotten out of that, he never would have gotten into the other deeper stuff he got into, because he thought if he could get out of that, he could get out of anything. He thought he was invincible. Pointed a finger at me and said, this man taught me everything I know. I said, no, I didn't. I didn't teach you to take arms to Cuba. He just laughed. He laughed at everything.
Invincible is, of course, just another way of saying above the law. This arrest is just the first of at least 4 separate arrests during Barry Seal's spook career, which we uncovered, that have never before been reported. Charlie Montgomery was recruited by Barry in the same way he himself had been recruited by David Ferry.
I met Barry in the summer of '68. I was 11 years old. And it was one of those things where I was the monotonous kid that he couldn't get rid of. So he had to take me in. I was free to roam the neighborhood, and he had a helicopter parked in the front of his house on a trailer, so there was an obvious attraction to an 11-year-old kid who wanted to be around aircraft. I was pretty free to go and come as I pleased, and the older I got, the more freedom I got, where I could disappear for long periods of time, and nobody really wondered why.
Like David Ferry before him, Barry Seal's career clearly illustrates the merger of the CIA and the mob.
It was a late evening one night, probably 10, 11 o'clock. We were at the aircraft company, and this is one of the very few times I've seen Barry nervous. Very rarely was he nervous. And he asked me to go to work for an organization that had been around me, and I'd worked around a lot of the people, and they felt like they liked my work and I would be good for them. But it was a very big commitment. It was much later, after the things started coming out, I had all kinds of suspicions. And then after the '72 arrest, I was real confused, because I thought it was more organized crime type thing, and as it went on, it had more of the pictures of some sort of other involvement, maybe secret activity or government or somewhere along those lines. It was very clear that there was no turning back once you cross that boundary. It was a permanent decision.
We were interested in importing shrimp into the New York area from Panama, which could have been and would have been very lucrative. We met first with Carlo Gambino. We explained, Barry did most of the explanation, what we wanted to do. Mr. Gambino seemed to think it might be a good idea, but his nephew Manny was in charge of all the restaurants and various places like that. However, he was busy at the time, so we arranged to meet with him several days later. And several days later, Manny Gambino disappeared. They found blood in his car, and no one has seen Manny Gambino since that time, as far as I know.
In a weapons smuggling bust in 1972, James Miller was arrested with Barry with 7 tons of plastic explosive, part of an ongoing and never-before-revealed CIA plot to overthrow Castro in the 70s.
Barry Seal was led by someone that obviously he had a lot of faith in to believe that Cuba was going to be overthrown with the backing of the United States government through the CIA. We were offered support from the Mexican Air Force, from people. We flew into an Air Force base in Mexico. We met with some people that had uniforms on, and I have no idea what their rank was supposed to have been, but we met with those people and assured by them that we would have their full support if we needed it and wanted it. And then we, of course, returned to the United States, and with the understanding we'd have all the support from everybody, including the United States government, through the CIA. And that's not what transpired.
Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton has long been suspected of having ties with Barry Seal. Guess what? The suspicions were correct.
One of the local DEA agents had told me that Barry had been arrested in Mena, Arkansas. And I ran into Barry a week or two later at a pay telephone, and we were talking, and he said, "Let me show you something." So he showed me a paper that was, you know, somebody has to sign his bond for him to get out of jail. Signed by Bill Clinton, who at that time I believe was the Attorney General for the state of Arkansas. So then I began to realize that Barry was pretty heavily politically connected.
But Clinton is just one of the people with household names associated with Barry. On another occasion, then U.S. Attorney Asa Hutchinson took care of things for Barry. According to the state police official in charge of Mena, the Arkansas State Police didn't even try to develop a case against the Mena drug smuggling because Barry was being protected by U.S. Attorney Hutchinson. When Barry Seal associate Roy Fugler took a company called Netivation public recently, it publishes the U.S. Congress Fact Book and has a major internet site for campaign fundraising. The first thing they did was to sign on as their marketing poster boy. Guess who? Arkansas Congressman Asa Hutchinson, the man who prevented Seal from being prosecuted while U.S. Attorney for the district in western Arkansas encompassing Mena. Congressman Hutchinson, shown here with a masked friend, is a member of the Speaker's Task Force for a Drug-Free America, whose mandate is to seek out new and more effective approaches to combating the threat of drug use among the nation's youth. He also somehow found the time to present the case to the Senate for the impeachment of Bill Clinton, where he urged the senators in his closing argument to let justice roll down like mighty waters. Were that to happen, we would urge the congressman not to wear his good suit that day, because we suspect both he and Clinton might get awfully wet. So here then is the Mena scandal's big dirty secret. Barry Seal was no accident. He didn't just stumble onto Mena, nor did he just happen to luck into his eventual career. Instead, he was a lifelong member of what E. Howard Hunt puckishly refers to as clandestine services.
I mean, I sat out here at this airport at the state hangar while the DEA people sat over there watching him modify a Beech 18 right out here on the ramp. And I just asked him, I said, well, why don't you just go get him? And one of the guys told me one time there, he said, he's either the slickest operator there ever was or he's working for us.
There's former Attorney General Ed Meese, for example. Top IRS investigator Bill Duncan was prevented from testifying to Congress about what he knew about a $400,000 bribe which Barry paid Ed Meese. And then, of course, there's Oliver North. At this Baton Rouge restaurant, witnesses told us, North was seen with Barry Seal. And one top law enforcement official told us that an investigating committee of the U.S. Congress in 1988 heard enough evidence of North's drug smuggling to send him to jail for the rest of his life. In America, being connected, of course, means never having to say you're sorry. And we like what former CIA pilot and lawyer Gary Idle said to us about North. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to a car wash makes you a car. And then there's the King Air 200, like this one, tying Barry Seal to George W. Bush. While Barry Seal's ties to former President Bush have been well known for years, the most talked about event in Seal's life concerns the persistent rumor that Barry had videotaped a hastily aborted DEA cocaine sting, in which were caught George Bush's two sons, George W. and Jeb, caught picking up kilos of cocaine at a Florida airport. We have not been able to prove this persistent allegation, but the search for proof turned up something just as shocking. The King Air used in the alleged sting went from being flown in drug smuggling missions by Barry Seal to later becoming the favorite airplane of Texas Governor George W. Bush. Bush.